They said my life wasn't worth more than a set of golf clubs. But they had no idea I was hiding an $80 million secret. I sat in a kitchen soaked in the smell of mildew and loneliness. The ticking wall clock sounded like it was counting down the final days of my life. In front of me were two bills side by side. One was for repairing my battered old truck so I could get around. The other was for my blood pressure and heart medication. I opened my wallet. Only a few crumpled bills remained. I had to choose between being able to move or being able to breathe. My name is Stephen, a father who spent his entire life building a future for his children, only to realize that in their eyes, I had become nothing more than an old debt, an embarrassing secret they wanted hidden away behind the walls of their luxury mansions. Welcome to Dad's real-life revenge. Stay with me until the end of this story, and leave a comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Yesterday, I called Melvin. He said he was busy. Linda hung up the second she heard me cough. They were terrified I was going to ask for money, terrified that my poverty might infect their glamorous lives. I pressed a hand against my chest as the pain tightened. Not because of the illness, because of the betrayal. I stared out the window as memories flooded back. I used to work double shifts so Melvin could have his first set of golf clubs. I skipped meals so Linda could wear the prettiest dress at prom. And now here I was, counting pills, the same way I counted the shattered pieces of my life. This house was too large for a man waiting to die, yet somehow too small to hold the compassion of my children. I grabbed the old newspaper wedged beneath the crooked table leg. My hands trembled. I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of disappearing without anyone even noticing. But life always takes unexpected turns. Just when I was ready to give up everything, just when I had accepted that I was a complete failure, the phone rang. An unknown number, a lawyer, a will from a distant cousin named Percy. Percy. The only person I had ever taken the time to truly listen to at a dreary funeral years ago. Turns out kindness is never forgotten. It simply waits for the right moment to bloom. A 2,000-acre ranch and $80 million appeared before me like the wildest dream imaginable. But before I could claim any of it, I had to do one thing. I had to carry out one final test for the people I once called family. I stared at the old phone as if it had suddenly turned into a solid bar of gold. On the other end of the line was the calm, professional voice of Attorney Morrison. He repeated the number one more time. $80 million. My ears rang. My aging heart pounded wildly inside my frail chest. I asked him if he had mistaken me for someone else. But no. Percy had named me directly in a 10-page will. I remembered Percy well. A quiet man the family always treated like an oddball. At his wife's funeral 10 years ago, everyone else spent their time gossiping about designer suits and expensive jewelry. I was the only one who stayed beside Percy. I listened to him talk about the sun-scorched fields of Texas for an entire afternoon. I did not do it for money. I did it because I understood what it felt like to be abandoned. And now that simple act of kindness had brought me an enormous fortune. Attorney Morrison explained that I was not only inheriting cash, I was now the legal owner of a 2,000-acre ranch, an entire kingdom of cattle herds, and open land stretching all the way to the horizon. One moment I was counting blood pressure pills to survive, and the next I had become one of the wealthiest men in the region. The shock quickly gave way to a deep, bitter ache. I looked around my miserable kitchen. The cracks in the walls and the leaking ceiling seemed to mock me. I was rich yet still alone. I had $80 million, yet my own children saw me as nothing more than a cheap burden. Attorney Morrison hesitated before reading the final condition of the will. Percy had left behind one last message. Money is a powerful acid. It can melt away the fake masks people wear. He wanted me to keep the inheritance a secret until the test was complete. I tightened my grip around the phone as a daring idea flashed through my mind. I would not rush to put on an expensive suit. I would remain poor, sick old Stephen in the eyes of my children. I wanted to know if there was still even a tiny piece of humanity left inside Melvin and Linda's hearts, or if they had already let the devil guide them completely. I held Percy's letter tightly in my hands. His handwriting was strong and decisive, just like the man himself. Attorney Morrison had just emailed me a copy. Every sentence struck my mind like a hammer blow. Percy wrote that he had spent decades watching this entire family. He called them a flock of vultures circling the corpses of wealth. They only appeared when they smelled money. They only smiled when they saw numbers. Percy chose me because, according to him, I still possessed something the others had lost long ago: sincerity. He wrote, "Stephen, you were the only person who looked into my eyes instead of staring at the watch on my wrist." But Percy also left behind a chilling warning. Money does not change people. It simply reveals who they truly are. He warned me to be extremely careful. Once this secret came to light, the people closest to me could become the most dangerous. They would not stop until they stripped every last thing from me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I sat silently in the darkness of my living room. The glow from my phone screen illuminated the deep wrinkles on my face. I was holding a power capable of changing everyone's lives around me. But I was also holding a spark that could burn everything to ashes. Percy wanted me to carry out a test of the human heart. A test whose outcome might shatter my heart all over again. I began questioning myself. Did I really want to know the truth? Did I truly have the courage to see my children's real faces when forced to choose between family and money? I took a long, deep breath. I had to do this. Not only because of Percy's will, but because of myself. I needed to know whether I still had a real family left. My trembling fingers moved across the contacts on my phone until Melvin's name appeared on the screen. My eldest son. The child I had once been so proud of. The son I sacrificed my youth for so he could build the successful life he has today. I pressed the call button. A single phone call that would begin a chain of horrifying truths I could never have imagined. The phone rang for a long time before someone finally answered. On the other end, I could hear the noisy atmosphere of an upscale country club. Golf clubs clinked together in the background. Melvin's voice came through impatient and irritated. He asked what could possibly be so important that I had to call at this hour. I forced my voice to sound as weak and shaky as possible. I told him the doctor had just warned me that I was at high risk of suffering a stroke. I needed about $5,000 a month to pay for specialized medication and a caregiver. A terrifying silence followed. I could hear Melvin letting out a long, frustrated sigh through the phone. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not ask whether I was in pain. The very first thing he did was complain about money. He said business had been difficult lately. He had just paid expensive piano tuition for his son. Then there was all the new hockey equipment and the luxury summer vacation the family had already planned. I reminded him that this was a matter of life and death. I only needed help for a few months to get through this dangerous period. Melvin snapped. He said $5,000 was far too much money. He told me I should consider selling my old house or applying for government assistance. Then he said something that made my heart nearly stop. "That's your problem, Dad. Figure it out yourself." I sat there in stunned silence. "So you would rather buy golf clubs than help your father stay alive?" Melvin never answered the question directly. He simply said he had to get back to an important game with business partners. He could not let personal matters interfere with work. Then the line went dead. The endless beeping afterward felt like a knife carving into my chest. The son I once carried in my arms. The little boy I sacrificed meals and comfort for. The child I gave everything to. Now he considered his father's life worth less than a luxury hobby. I collapsed into my worn-out armchair. Hot tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. The test had only just begun, yet I already felt like a defeated man. But I could not stop now. I still had a daughter. Linda had always said she loved me more than anyone else in the world. Would Linda be any different from her brother? Or would my precious little girl also push me into the abyss of disappointment? If you believe kindness is always rewarded, make sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss the moment when the ungrateful finally face the consequences of their betrayal. I placed the phone back on the table. My hands were still trembling after Melvin's cruel words. The last bit of hope I had left rested with Linda, my daughter, who always spoke sweetly whenever the holidays came around. I dialed her number. The ringing echoed through the room. At that moment, it sounded more like a warning siren than a phone call. Linda answered. Loud music and cheerful laughter blasted through the speaker behind her. I repeated the same story. I told her about the looming risk of a stroke and the $5,000 I needed each month to stay alive. Linda went silent for a second. But it was not the silence of compassion. Her voice suddenly sharpened as she began interrogating me. She asked if I was being scammed by someone. She said the world was full of con artists targeting elderly people. My throat tightened as I explained that this came directly from my doctor. I truly needed her help. Then Linda started complaining. She said she was already struggling with the expenses of living in a luxury apartment. She had just signed payments for a brand new luxury SUV. Linda insisted she had absolutely no extra money. Please understand, Dad, she said. I have my own life and pressures you wouldn't understand. I mentioned the new SUV. I asked whether she could delay some of her spending to help save her father's life. Linda's tone instantly turned irritated. She said the vehicle was necessary for her work and social image. She could not show up in front of wealthy friends driving an old, embarrassing car. Then she said she had an important appointment and abruptly hung up. The lifeless tone of the disconnected call filled the room. I looked toward the mirror. A frail old man with cloudy eyes stared back at me. 2 children, 2 phone calls, and 2 buckets of ice water thrown straight into my face. They had money for expensive golf clubs. They had money for luxury SUVs. But they did not have a single dollar for the life of the father who raised them. That truth hurt even more than death itself. I felt like an abandoned ruin. I sat alone in the darkness, wondering if there was any reason left to continue this test at all. Then, suddenly, I heard the rumbling sound of an old engine pulling into the yard. Headlights shined through the cracks in the front door. Someone was arriving in the middle of the night. What I did not know was that this meeting would completely change the way I viewed human kindness. An angel was about to appear at the exact moment I had lost all hope, and when you discover who that person is, you will not be able to hold back your tears. The old wooden door groaned as I pulled it open. Beneath the dim streetlight, a battered pickup truck rattled loudly in the driveway. A small figure stepped out, exhausted from lack of sleep, yet his eyes burned with worry. It was Tyler, my grandson. The boy had driven non-stop for 800 miles from his university the moment he overheard part of my phone call with his father. Tyler rushed toward me and wrapped his arms around me tightly. He was trembling with fear for his grandfather's health. He did not ask about money. He asked if I had eaten. He asked how I was feeling. He gently helped me back inside his young and steady hands, supporting my frail body. Then Tyler placed an old, worn envelope onto the table. The corners were frayed from being carried around too long. He told me there was $843 inside. Every single dollar he had managed to save from working part-time at a bakery and washing cars over the past 2 years. Tyler grabbed my hand, his voice shaking with emotion. "Grandpa, don't worry about the medicine anymore," he whispered. "I already decided I'm taking a break from college next semester. I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. I'll make the $5,000 every month somehow." Then he said the words that shattered what remained of my broken heart. Money can be earned again. But I only have one grandfather. While my own children were choosing luxury resorts for their vacations, my grandson was choosing to sacrifice his education just to save my life. My chest tightened as a powerful wave of emotion crashed through me. I looked into Tyler's sincere eyes, and for the first time in years I saw hope in humanity again. This boy was willing to give up his future for an old man his own parents treated like a burden. I broke down crying. But these tears were not born from pain. They came from being deeply moved beyond words. If you have stayed with us this far, please take one quick moment to subscribe. So many people watch without doing it, but it costs nothing and means everything to us. I squeezed Tyler's hand tightly. At that moment, I knew I had finally found the rightful heir to Percy's legacy. But Tyler still had no idea about the enormous secret I was carrying. He still believed I was dying and penniless. I stared at the envelope filled with my grandson's sweat-stained savings, and a new plan slowly began forming in my mind. A plan not only to punish the wicked, but to bless the good-hearted. I wiped away my tears and looked deeply into Tyler's eyes. I was about to tell him a truth that would change his life forever. But first, there was one final thing I needed to test. I looked at Tyler as he continued checking the medicine bottles on the table. He had no idea he had just passed one of the cruelest tests imaginable. I took a deep breath. The truth caught in my throat as I grabbed his rough hands worn from hard work. "Tyler," I said softly, "listen to me. I do not have a stroke, and I do not need your savings." Tyler froze. He stared at me in complete shock. Slowly I began telling him everything. About the phone call from Attorney Morrison. About my distant cousin Percy. About the $80 million inheritance, and about the cold-hearted betrayal of his own parents. Tyler sat there, speechless. Tears rolled down his face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. He threw his arms around me and thanked God that I was still healthy. Not once did he ask how much money he would receive. That alone shattered me in the best possible way. I cried again, this time from pure happiness. "You protected my future," I told him. "Now I am going to protect yours." I explained that this entire plan had been created to discover who truly deserved a place in my new life. Tyler had chosen loyalty over money. He had won a game his parents had lost completely. While my children were choosing luxury resorts for their vacations, my grandson was preparing to sacrifice his education just to save my life. That thought echoed endlessly in my mind. For the first time in years, I felt a new strength rising inside me. The weakness and hopelessness disappeared. In their place stood the determination of a man now holding the power to shape destinies. I told Tyler we would not spend another minute inside this damp, miserable house. We were going to Texas, to the massive ranch waiting for us, to the beginning of an entirely new chapter. But I was not ready to end this game yet, no. I wanted to see Melvin and Linda's faces when they realized what they had thrown away. A perfect transformation plan was already taking shape in my mind. I would return someday, but not as the pitiful old man they abandoned. And when they saw the new version of me standing before them, what would they do then? Tyler and I left the old house that very night. The journey to Texas became a true transformation. No more exhausted coughing, no more meals measured down to the last dollar. I walked into a luxury clothing store and bought myself the finest suit I had worn in over 20 years. When I looked into the mirror, I no longer saw the defeated old Stephen. I saw a man with power, a man with confidence. We finally arrived at the 2,000-acre ranch. It was a breathtaking paradise of endless green fields and a grand estate standing proudly beneath the Texas sky. I bought a powerful new pickup truck. I hired the best lawyers money could buy to protect Percy's legacy. My life had changed completely. But one thing remained exactly the same: my silence toward Melvin and Linda. My phone began vibrating nonstop. Melvin was calling. Linda was sending messages. Maybe they had heard rumors from old neighbors. Or maybe they suddenly realized that losing contact with me also meant losing control. I looked at their names, flashing across the screen, and smiled calmly. Then I pressed decline. The feeling was strange. I had spent my entire life trying to please them. But now I was the one controlling the game. I stood on the balcony of the mansion and watched Tyler laughing as he ran freely across the open fields. For the first time in years, the boy could return to school without worrying about tuition or survival. I had spent 63 years living according to everyone else's expectations. But from this day forward, people would have to earn a place in my life. Still, my silence was only the beginning of a much larger storm. Melvin and Linda were not the type to give up once they smelled money. They were already planning to come here. They believed a few fake apologies would be enough to get their hands on the fortune. What they did not know was that I had prepared a welcome they would never forget. The direct confrontation was coming, and when the truth was finally exposed, would they even dare to look me in the eyes? The roaring engine of a luxury SUV shattered the peaceful silence of the ranch. Melvin and Linda stepped out of the vehicle, their eyes sweeping across the massive estate with shock and greed. Linda rushed toward me, trying to throw her arms around me. In the sweetest voice imaginable, she said how worried she had been about me. She called me Daddy, as though that cold-hearted phone call from weeks earlier had never happened. Beside her, Melvin forced an awkward smile and complimented my suit, saying I looked incredibly distinguished. I stood there with my arms crossed, staring at them with eyes as cold as ice. I did not invite them inside. Instead, I remained on the front porch and calmly repeated every cruel word they had said to me. I asked Melvin about his new golf clubs. I asked Linda about the shiny SUV she could not sacrifice to save her father's life. Their faces shifted from pale to burning red with shame. Melvin stuttered that he had only been joking back then. Linda quickly blamed stress from work and claimed she had not been thinking clearly. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. It was no longer the laugh of a broken old man. It carried authority, power, finality. I have heard enough, I said. I spent my entire life building a foundation for both of you, and you treated me like a debt that needed to disappear. When I needed $5,000 to survive, you turned your backs on me. But the moment $80 million appeared suddenly, you remembered what family means. I looked directly into their eyes. I will no longer accept scraps of affection. Now I decide who deserves a place in my life. Then I motioned for Tyler to step forward. The moment Melvin saw his own son standing beside me, his expression froze in disbelief. I told them plainly that Tyler had been the only person willing to drive 800 miles to save me while his parents were busy enjoying luxury vacations and expensive hobbies. Your betrayal showed me who my real family truly is." Linda immediately burst into tears and began begging for forgiveness. Melvin tried using logic and excuses, desperately arguing about family rights and misunderstandings. But I had already turned away. "I spent 63 years living for other people," I said, without looking back. "From today onward, if either of you wants a place in my life, you will have to earn it." Those words hit them harder than any slap ever could. At that moment they understood the gates of this ranch had closed forever to the ungrateful. But the punishment was still not over. Because hidden inside the new will I signed that very morning was one final card. A final move that would leave Melvin and Linda drowning in regret for the rest of their lives. I stood there watching their SUV disappear into the cloud of dust, trailing along the dirt road, leading away from the ranch. In my hands rested the new will, officially signed and sealed by Attorney Morrison. I had made my final decision. Every dollar of the fortune, and every acre of this ranch, would belong to Tyler. The boy was not simply inheriting money. He was receiving the reward for the compassion and integrity his parents had thrown away long ago. I lowered myself into the armchair on the porch and quietly watched the blazing sunset paint the Texas fields in deep shades of red and gold. This feeling of peace was something $80 million could never buy. Only truth and inner peace could give a man that. For the first time in years, I no longer felt hatred, only relief. Melvin and Linda would now spend the rest of their lives carrying the memory of how cheaply they valued their father's life. They did not lose because I became rich. They lost because they were spiritually bankrupt. Money does not change people. It only reveals who they truly are. I had seen the real faces of the people I once loved most. But I had also discovered light in the place I least expected. Family is the one who stays when life becomes difficult, not the one who appears when money arrives. Share this story if you would choose loyalty over wealth. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind moving across the endless grasslands. For the first time in a very long while, I felt that I truly belonged somewhere. The journey from that miserable kitchen to this magnificent ranch was never only about becoming wealthy. It was about reclaiming my dignity. My story may end here, but the new life Tyler and I are building has only just begun. What would you do if you were faced with Percy's test? Leave your thoughts below, and thank you for staying with me until the very end.